The interstellar transport ship Odyssey Dawn floated quietly among the stars, carrying travelers of many worlds toward the shining capital station of the Galactic Union. The cabin was alive with noise, the hum of languages blending together, laughter echoing in small groups, and the rustle of luggage being tucked into compartments. It was a normal day, another journey through space. But that calm shifted the moment she entered. She stepped through the automatic door slowly, her figure wrapped in a dark gray cloak that brushed against the floor. Her movements were quiet, graceful, yet every head turned toward her. The faint glow of her skin shimmered beneath the fabric, silver lines pulsing softly like veins of light. When she lifted her eyes, they gleamed with a pale metallic hue, beautiful but strange enough to make hearts tighten with unease. A whisper ran through the cabin. "Is that a Vashtari?" Someone murmured. The chatter faded as if silence itself had entered with her. Everyone knew the Vashtari, once proud warriors from a distant system, now a scattered people carrying the heavy shadow of an old war. 10 years ago, their fleets had clashed with the humans and their allies in the Blood Rift War. Many lives were lost on both sides. Peace was declared later, but forgiveness never truly followed. Now one of them stood here, clutching a small travel bag, looking for a seat among those who still remembered the screams of the past. She walked carefully down the narrow aisle, her head slightly lowered. She could feel the stares piercing her cloak. Each time she passed a row, someone suddenly adjusted their seat, placed a bag beside them, or turned away. A few pretended to be asleep. Others whispered harsh words under their breath. No one offered her a seat. Her chest ached with quiet shame, but she kept walking. She had faced worse. Still, the loneliness pressed on her like invisible gravity. The hum of the ship's engines became her only companion. Then, near the back of the cabin, she noticed something different. A young human man sat alone, quietly reading something on his datapad. His short brown hair caught the light from the ceiling, and his face looked calm. Not the cold kind of calm others wore, but the peaceful kind that comes from someone used to silence. He hadn't noticed her yet. The seat beside him was empty. She hesitated. Her heart beat faster. Should I sit there? She wondered. Every other option had already closed its doors to her. Still, she feared that same rejection. She stood there uncertain until the human looked up. Their eyes met. For a moment, time seemed to slow. She saw no anger there, no disgust, and just a quiet curiosity. He blinked, tilted his head slightly, and smiled. Not a wide smile, but a small, honest one. "Seat's open if you want it," he said in a warm voice. She froze, unsure if he meant it. The words felt unreal. Around them, a few passengers glanced back, frowning as if silently asking him why he would offer that kindness. But he didn't care. He simply moved his bag aside, making space for her. Slowly, she stepped forward and sat down beside him. Her cloak rustled softly, and she kept her hands folded on her lap, nervous but grateful. The human said nothing more, just returned to his reading, as if her presence was the most natural thing in the world. For a long while, she sat in silence, feeling something she hadn't felt in years: safety. The ship continued its quiet journey through the endless dark, the stars outside stretching like silver threads. Around her, whispers still moved like cold winds, but beside her was warmth. She looked at him again, the human who didn't turn away. His calmness wrapped around her like invisible light. In that moment, a strange thought touched her heart like a fragile, dangerous hope. Maybe not all humans hated her kind. Maybe peace wasn't just words written on paper. Maybe it lived in small actions, like one person choosing to sit beside someone the world had already rejected. For the first time in a very long time, she allowed herself to breathe without fear. The Odyssey Dawn sailed on through the stars, carrying two souls, one human, one alien, seated together in a silence that spoke louder than any war ever could. The hum of the engines filled the ship, a soft vibration beneath their feet. The alien woman sat quietly beside the young human, her cloak gathered tightly around her. She didn't know what to say or if she should say anything at all. The human hadn't spoken since offering her the seat. He just read from his datapad, the glow reflecting faintly on his calm face. He seemed peaceful, untouched by the tension that still hung in the air around them. Every now and then she could feel the glances from other passengers, Some looked away quickly when she noticed others didn't bother to hide their disapproval. But the human never looked up, never seemed bothered by what anyone thought. She wanted to ask him why. Why had he let her sit there when everyone else had turned away? Why did he not fear her kind? But her throat felt dry. Minutes passed like hours. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was fragile, like something that could break if touched too harshly. Finally, she found the courage to speak. Her voice was soft, uncertain. "You are not afraid to sit near me?" The human looked up slowly. His eyes were steady, kind, and his tone calm. "Should I be?" She blinked, surprised. "My kind, the Vashtari. We fought against your people," she said quietly. "Many humans died because of us." He nodded slowly, not denying it. "Yeah," he said. "I remember learning about that war." Then he closed his datapad and looked at her fully. "But that was years ago. You didn't start that war, did you?" She shook her head. "No, I was just a child when it began. But people don't forget. To them, every Vashatari is the same." The human smiled faintly. "People forget that peace isn't just the absence of war. It's how we treat each other after it ends." His words caught her off guard. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not since the war ended. Most people looked at her with fear or hate, sometimes both. But this human looked at her like she was just another traveler. Another person sharing the same stars. "What is your name?" she asked softly. "Elias," he said with a small nod. "And you?" She hesitated for a moment before answering. "My name is Lyra." "Nice to meet you, Lyra," he said kindly. The simple politeness made her chest tighten with emotion. It had been so long since anyone had said her name without bitterness. She turned her gaze to the window, watching the slow dance of stars outside. The reflection of her face glowed faintly in the glass. Silver eyes, strange markings, alien features that made others step away. But for once she didn't feel completely alone with that reflection. Elias leaned back in his seat, glancing out the same window. "It's funny," he said, breaking the silence again. "All this space out there, billions of worlds, and we still find time to hate each other." Lyra looked at him quietly, his words echoing in her heart. "Maybe. Some wounds take longer to heal," she said. "Maybe," he agreed. "But someone has to start the healing, right?" She smiled, a small, sad smile that reached her eyes. "Maybe," she whispered again. For a long time they just sat there watching the stars. The whispers from the other passengers faded, the tension slowly dissolving into the hum of the ship. Elias opened a small packet of ration food and offered her a piece. "Hungry?" She hesitated before taking it. The taste was plain, but it felt like the kindest meal she'd ever been given. "Thank you," she said softly. He just nodded, smiling again. "You're welcome." As she ate, her thoughts drifted. How strange, she thought, that one human's kindness could feel stronger than an entire war's hatred. For the first time in years, she felt something gentle blooming inside her chest, something she almost didn't recognize. Hope. The ship continued its steady journey through the stars, but something had already shifted between them. The silence that once stood like a wall had turned into a bridge, and across that fragile bridge, two souls, one human and one alien, had begun to understand each other. The soft hum of the Odyssey dawn filled the quiet cabin. Most passengers had drifted into sleep or silence, their faces lit by the dim glow of the starlight beyond the window. But in the last row, Elias and Lyra still sat awake. Lyra's silver eyes were fixed on the stars outside, their cold beauty reminding her of home, a home she had not seen in years. Her voice broke the silence softly. "Your world, Earth," she said slowly. "Is it as beautiful as they say?" Elias turned to her, surprised but pleased that she had started a conversation. "Yeah," he said with a smile. "It's loud and messy, but beautiful. Blue oceans, green forests, golden deserts. You'd like it?" She smiled faintly. "It sounds peaceful," he laughed quietly. "Not always. We fight too, sometimes with words, sometimes worse. But somehow we always rebuild." Lyra looked down at her hands, tracing the faint glowing patterns along her fingers. "We used to rebuild too," she whispered. "Before the war took everything." Elias didn't interrupt. He sensed something heavy behind her words. "My world was called Vashara," she continued. "It was full of crystal lakes and silver trees that sang when the wind passed through them. I remember playing under them with my brother. His name was Kael." Her voice softened. "He joined the military when the war started." I was only 15. I didn't understand what war really meant. I just thought he was brave. He promised he'd come back. She fell silent, her throat tight. Elias said nothing, letting her speak when she was ready. He never came back, she said finally. Our cities burned. The skies turned red, and when the fighting ended, there was no home left to return to. Now we are scattered. Refugees, survivors, ghosts of a world no one wants to remember. A tear slipped down her cheek, glowing faintly in the cabin light. She quickly brushed it away, ashamed of the weakness. Elias's voice was soft when he spoke. You don't have to hide that, he said. Loss doesn't make you weak. Lyra looked at him, her eyes full of quiet pain. Do humans understand loss? Elias nodded. Too well, he said. My father fought in the same war. He didn't come home either. She looked at him with surprise. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then slowly she reached out and rested her hand over his, a small hesitant gesture of shared sorrow. I'm sorry, she whispered. He smiled gently. I think they'd both be happy to see this, us sitting here, not fighting anymore. Lyra nodded, her throat too tight to speak. After a while, Elias pulled a small photo from his jacket pocket. An old, faded picture of a smiling woman and a dog beside a wooden house. That's my sister, he said. She lives near the coast. I promised her I'd visit after my job on the station. Lyra stared at the photo with quiet wonder. She looks kind, she said softly. She is, Elias replied. She always says humanity's greatest strength isn't power. It's compassion. Lyra smiled sadly. Then she must be right. The two of them sat together, watching the stars as stories flowed between them. Stories of childhood, of loss, of small dreams that somehow survived even after everything else was gone. At some point, Elias took out his ration bar again and broke it in half, offering her the piece. She accepted it with a small smile. You humans always share your food, she said. He grinned. It's how we make friends. Then, she said softly, I am honored. The hum of the ship felt warmer somehow, like the sound of a heartbeat. In that vast, endless sea of stars, two lost souls, one human, one alien, found a strange comfort in each other's stories. The past still hurt. The memories still burned, but for the first time, Lyra felt that the future might hold something brighter than pain. Elias leaned back, watching her with quiet respect. He didn't see an enemy anymore. He saw a person, broken, kind, and still trying to heal. And Lyra, for the first time in years, no longer felt invisible. The Odyssey dawn glided through the stars, silent and steady. The passengers were calm again, talking softly, sharing meals and waiting for the next docking station. Elias and Lyra sat together near the back, still quietly speaking between pauses, their words gentle like the hum of the engines. But peace in the galaxy was a fragile thing, and so was the peace between their hearts. At the next stop, the ship opened its doors for a new group of passengers. Among them was a tall human man in a gray uniform. His boots clanked against the metal floor and a scar ran from his temple down to his jaw. The moment he entered, the air seemed to change. Colder, heavier. Lyra didn't look up. She had learned long ago that sometimes silence was safer, but Elias noticed the man instantly. His uniform carried the insignia of the Galactic Defense Force, the same army that had fought the Vashatari. The soldier moved down the aisle, scanning the rows for a seat. Then his eyes landed on Lyra. For a moment he froze, his face darkened, anger flashing in his eyes. What the hell is that doing here? He barked, pointing straight at Lyra. The cabin fell silent. All eyes turned to them again. Lyra's hands tightened on her cloak, her heart racing. She wanted to disappear. Elias stood quickly. She's a passenger, he said firmly. Same as you, the soldier scoffed. Passenger? That's a Vashtari. You know what they did? They killed hundreds of us, my brother included. They don't deserve to walk among us. Lyra's throat tightened. Her voice trembled when she spoke. I am sorry, she said softly. Truly, I never... Sorry? The soldier snapped. You think that fixes it? You think that brings him back? Elias stepped closer. No, it doesn't, but yelling at her won't bring him back either. The soldier glared at him, fists clenching. Why are you defending her? Don't tell me you've forgotten what her people did. Elias met his gaze calmly. I haven't forgotten, he said. But I also haven't forgotten what forgiveness looks like. The man's jaw tightened. Forgiveness? There's no such thing when it comes to her kind. Lyra could feel the old pain rising again, the same pain she carried since her world burned. She stood slowly, her silver eyes wet. "I have lost family too," she whispered. "My brother died in that same war. I know your pain. I live it every day." Her voice trembled, but there was strength beneath it. "But if we keep hating, then they all died for nothing." The soldier stared at her, his anger flickering into something else. Confusion, maybe even shame. He opened his mouth to speak, but said nothing. The silence stretched until it felt heavy enough to crush the air. Finally, he turned away, muttering under his breath, "You people never change." Then he walked toward the front and sat down, far from them. Lyra slowly sat again, her hands still shaking. The whispers returned around them, softer this time, uncertain. Elias sat beside her and said nothing for a while. He could see how deeply the encounter had hurt her. Finally, he spoke in a gentle voice. "You didn't have to say anything, you know." She looked at him with tired eyes. "Yes, I did," she said. "Because if I stay silent, then their anger wins. I don't want to live in fear anymore." Elias smiled faintly, admiring her courage. "You're stronger than you think." Her lips trembled into a small, sad smile. "No," she whispered. "I just don't want to hate anymore." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the stars burned quietly, distant and eternal. Elias looked at her, truly seeing her. Not as an alien, not as an enemy, but as someone who had carried pain for too long. "You defended peace today," he said softly. "That's more than most of us ever do." Lyra turned her eyes toward the stars again. Her heart still ached, but something inside her had changed. The fear that had lived there for years began to fade, replaced by something gentler, strength. And as the Odyssey Dawn continued its journey, a small spark of hope traveled with it, glowing quietly in the space between a human and a Vashatari who refused to let the past define them. The next few hours passed quietly. The tension that had filled the cabin slowly melted away, replaced by a soft, uneasy calm. The soldier no longer looked in their direction, though a few passengers still cast glances at Lyra when they thought she wouldn't notice. But she no longer hid her face. She sat upright, her cloak slightly open now, revealing the faint silver patterns that traced her arms. They shimmered softly under the cabin lights like living threads of light. Elias noticed the beauty in them, the same way one might admire the glow of distant stars. "You're not hiding anymore," he said gently. Lyra turned to him and smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm tired of hiding," he nodded. "Good. The universe is too big for anyone to live in shadows." For the first time in a long time, Lyra laughed, a quiet, delicate sound that carried both joy and sorrow. It surprised even her. She'd almost forgotten what laughter felt like. Elias grinned. "That's a nice sound. You should do it more often." She shook her head, smiling softly. "You humans are strange. You always find a reason to smile even when everything hurts." "That's how we survive," he replied simply. "If we stop smiling, the darkness wins." Lyra looked down at her hands, remembering her brother's laughter, how it used to fill their home before the war. For a moment she could almost hear it again. It made her heart ache, but it also gave her strength. Elias reached into his bag and took out a small holo projector. "Want to see something?" She nodded curiously. He activated it, and a tiny glowing image appeared between them. A seaside view, waves rolling under an orange sky. The sound of gulls and crashing surf filled the air. "This is Earth," Elias said proudly. "The western coast. I took this picture last year." Lyra's eyes widened. The scene reflected in her silver pupils like a dream. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Your world has so much color. My home used to look like this before the fires." He looked at her gently. "Maybe one day your world will heal too." She smiled, though sadness lingered behind it. "Maybe. Healing takes time. So does forgiveness," he nodded. "Both start the same way, by wanting them." They fell into a soft silence again, watching the small image of the sea fade slowly into darkness. Outside the window, real stars shimmered, filling the sky with endless light. Lyra leaned back, feeling lighter than she had in years. "You know, Elias," she said quietly, "I used to believe humans were cruel, that your kind only knew how to take and destroy." Elias glanced at her. "And now?" "Now," she said, looking at him, "I think I was wrong." He smiled. We're not perfect. But sometimes we try, she nodded. Trying. It's enough. Their conversation drifted into lighter topics after that. Elias told her about human foods, pizza, coffee, and something called ice cream, which made her laugh again when he tried to explain the flavor. In return, Lyra told him about the luminous gardens of Vishara, where flowers would sing softly under the moonlight. The more they spoke, the more the weight between them disappeared. The war, the pain, the hatred, all of it seemed far away, as if it belonged to another lifetime. At one point, Lyra turned toward the window again. Look, she whispered. Elias followed her gaze. Outside, a comet streaked across the stars, leaving a trail of blue fire. For a few seconds, the cabin glowed with its light. It's beautiful, Elias said. Lyra's voice softened. My people believe a comet means new beginnings. Elias smiled. Then maybe this is ours. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat nothing else existed. Not the war, not the whispers, not the scars. Just two beings sitting together beneath the endless sky, daring to hope again. As the comet faded into the distance, Lyra whispered, Thank you, Elias, for seeing me. Not as what I am, but who I am. He smiled softly. It's the only way I know how to see. Outside, the stars burned quietly, watching over them. And inside that cold metal ship, something rare and fragile bloomed. Trust born from kindness and courage. Growing in the most unlikely place between a human and a Vashitari who dared to sit side by side. The stars outside the Odyssey dawn sparkled quietly, their light calm and steady. Inside, the cabin was peaceful. Passengers whispered softly, children played quietly, and the hum of the engines was like a gentle heartbeat. Lyra and Elias had settled into a quiet comfort, sharing stories and laughter. But peace, they soon discovered, was fragile. Without warning, the cabin shuddered violently. Alarms blared, red lights flashing. A deep rumble shook the ship as if a giant hand had gripped it. Screams erupted around them. Passengers stumbled, some falling over luggage, others clinging to rails. The ship had been hit. Pirates. Lyra's heart thumped painfully in her chest. She had survived wars before, but this felt sudden, terrifying, and personal. She grabbed Elias's arm. We have to get to the safe bay, she shouted over the alarms. Elias nodded, his face tense. Stay close. Don't let go. The aisle was chaos. Sparks rained down from exposed wires. Smoke curled through the cabin, stinging eyes and burning lungs. Panic filled the air like a thick fog. Lyra's instincts kicked in. The same instincts that had helped her survive countless battles. She felt the ship's trembling metal beneath her feet, the vibrations echoing through her body, telling her danger was near. Suddenly, a small human child screamed from under a fallen luggage crate. The child's eyes were wide with fear, tears streaking a soot-covered face. Without thinking, Elias ran toward the sound. Help me! He called. Lyra didn't hesitate. She followed him, her hands glowing faintly as she touched the metal around the debris. Heat surged through her palms, burning slightly, but she ignored it. With careful strength, she lifted the twisted metal, freeing the child. Elias grabbed the child and pulled him to safety, coughing from the smoke. Lyra stepped back, her glowing hands dimming as the immediate danger passed. She looked at the small human, his lips trembling as he clutched Elias. You're safe now, she whispered gently. Around them, passengers scrambled to find shelter. Crew members shouted orders, guiding people toward emergency pods. The pirates' boarding drones buzzed and lashed out, smashing panels and creating sparks. But Lyra and Elias moved together, instinctively covering each other. Elias glanced at her. Are you okay? He asked, his voice strained but steady. She nodded, catching her breath. I'm fine, she said. We just need to keep going. Hours felt like minutes as they helped passengers, dodged blasts, and moved toward the safe bay. Lyra's alien strength allowed her to lift heavy debris, while Elias's human resourcefulness guided them through the chaos. Together, they became more than survivors. They became protectors. Finally, the pirates were repelled by the ship's automated defenses and the crew's coordinated efforts. The cabin was scarred, smoke-stained walls, broken seats, and scorched floors. But every passenger was accounted for. Thanks to 2 passengers who refused to abandon others, casualties were minimal. When the alarms stopped, the cabin fell into a heavy silence. Exhaustion weighed on everyone. Lyra's silver eyes were wet, not from fear but from relief. She had faced countless horrors before, but this, helping others survive in a foreign ship among strangers, stirred a strange warmth in her chest. Elias leaned back, his arm brushing hers. "You did it," he said softly. She looked down at her burned hands, still glowing faintly, and shook her head. "We did it," she corrected. For the first time, the passengers looked at her with something other than fear or suspicion. There were nods, murmurs of respect, even small smiles. A few whispered, "She saved lives." Lyra turned to Elias, her voice low but steady. "Thank you," she said, "for trusting me, for staying by my side." Elias smiled faintly. "We're a team. That's what humans do, and we fight for each other." She returned his smile, small but genuine. Something in her chest had shifted. For the first time, she felt seen. Not as a Vashtari, not as an enemy, but as a person capable of courage, kindness, and connection. Outside, the stars still burned silently. But inside the cabin of the Odyssey Dawn, a quiet bond had strengthened. And both of them knew that whatever the universe threw at them next, they would face it together. The Odyssey Dawn finally docked at the capital station, the metal floor shaking gently as magnetic clamps locked the ship in place. Passengers began to disembark, tired, shaken, and still murmuring about the sudden attack they had survived. Lyra stood near the exit, her cloak torn and dusty, her silver hands bandaged. She had helped as many passengers as she could, and though exhaustion weighed on her, there was a strange lightness in her chest. Something inside had shifted. She was no longer just a Vashtari with a history of pain. She was someone who had made a difference, someone who had acted when others had hesitated. Elias approached, brushing soot from his uniform. "Where will you go now?" he asked, his voice gentle. He didn't try to hide the worry in his eyes. Lyra looked at him for a long moment. Her glowing eyes reflected the bright lights of the station. "Maybe. Somewhere no one knows my name," she said softly, her words carrying both sorrow and hope. Elias frowned slightly, though he smiled faintly. "Wherever that is, I hope you find peace," he said. She met his gaze, and something unspoken passed between them. A quiet understanding, a bond formed through shared stories, shared laughter, and the chaos of survival. "You gave me a reason to believe it's possible," she said. For a moment, silence stretched between them, but it was not heavy or tense. It was full of meaning. Then passengers began to move past them, leaving the two of them at the edge of the crowd. Lyra looked around, expecting the familiar cold stares, the fear she had known all her life. But something remarkable happened. A few travelers paused as they noticed her sitting alone near the station's benches. Some whispered to each other, unsure. Some hesitated. But a human woman approached Lyra slowly, her steps careful and deliberate. "Is this seat taken?" the woman asked. Lyra's heart skipped. She shook her head, her lips trembling into a small smile. The woman sat beside her, offering a gentle nod of respect. Around her, whispers faded into curiosity, then into quiet acceptance. Elias stood a few feet away, watching the scene with a quiet, satisfied smile. Humanity had done what it always did best. It had reached across fear, across difference, and it had chosen compassion. One small choice, one single seat beside a lonely stranger, had changed everything. Lyra looked at Elias and smiled, a smile full of warmth and gratitude. "You were right," she said softly. "Not everyone judges by the past. Some people see who you really are." Elias chuckled softly. "Sometimes it only takes one person to start changing the world," he replied. Her eyes glimmered, silver light dancing faintly in them. "Then maybe there's hope for all of us," she whispered. The station was crowded now, bustling with travelers from countless worlds. Lyra no longer felt invisible. She had survived suspicion, prejudice, and even hatred. And she had learned something precious. That kindness and courage were stronger than fear. A group of children ran past, laughing, unaware of the scars of history. Lyra reached out instinctively, smiling as a small hand brushed hers. Elias joined her side, and together they watched the stars through the station's wide glass panels. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, full of challenges, full of danger, but also full of possibilities. "Do you think," Lyra asked quietly, "that someday my people and yours will truly understand each other?" Elias looked at her, his eyes steady, unwavering. "I think they can," he said, "because it only takes a few to show the rest the way." And today, we've shown them. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt free. Not free from pain, that would never fully go away, but free from the chains of fear and hatred that had bound her for so long. She was seen. She was understood. She was no longer alone. And somewhere in the hum of the capital station, a quiet truth echoed across the cosmos. Humanity's greatest power was not its weapons, or its fleets, or its intelligence. It was its heart, the courage to reach out, to sit beside someone who the world had already rejected and to say, "You are not alone." The Vashatari woman and the human man stood together, two beings from worlds that once fought, now united by understanding, trust, and the simple power of compassion. The stars outside sparkled as if celebrating with them. And as Lyra sat finally at peace, she realized that sometimes one small act, one seat beside another, could change a life, and maybe even a galaxy. End.